Welcome to Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, a Game of Thrones story. From the gutters of Flea Bottom to the storm-swept decks of the Black Betha, this is the untold tale of Davos Seaworth, the smuggler who became a knight, the father who became a legend, branded a criminal, honoured as a hero. This is his storm, written by Brian M. Brumbaugh, narrated by Ned Rattor. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Flea Bottom's Son. King's Landing, 264 AC. The stink of Flea Bottom clung to everything. Flesh, cloth, even memory. Rotting cabbage, spilled ale, night soil, wet dogs, and the sharp tang of desperation. It was the perfume of the poor, and Davos Seaworth had breathed it since his first cry. He was 9 when he first stole bread. The baker caught him, of course, cuffed him hard across the ear, and chased him 2 alleys down before giving up. Davos hadn't cried. Tears were a luxury in Flea Bottom. He'd waited 2 hours, snuck back, and nicked a full loaf. Patience, that was the trick. Wait for your chance, then strike like a knife in the dark. His mother had coughed herself to death the following winter. The gold cloaks found her body near the edge of the black water, her hands raw from scrubbing floors that weren't her own. Davos lit a candle for her in the sept, though he didn't believe the gods listened to boys who smelled like piss and rats. Still, he whispered her name, Morella Seaworth. She'd never had a family name, but Davos gave her one anyway. The days blurred. He begged, he stole, he ran messages for whores, bartered scrap metal, fetched piss for tanners. Some days he slept with the butcher's dogs, some days with the pigs. He learned quickly that no one in Flea Bottom gave anything unless they got something worse in return. And yet he survived. It was a red morning when everything changed. Davos stood on the docks, watching the great black ship sway gently against its moorings. Its hull was scarred and patched with strange green wood. Its sails shimmered like oil. Painted on the stern in flaking gold letters, Cobblecat, and standing beside it, directing barrels and crates with a voice like cut glass, was the captain, Roro Uhoris. Tyroshi by blood, pirate by trade, and dressed like a drunken peacock. Rings sparkled from every finger. His beard was dyed a deep indigo, and his robe was slit open to the hip, revealing striped silken trousers and dagger-hilted boots. He steals children, whispered a dockhand behind Davos, cuts out their tongues and sells them to the Summer Islands. Davos didn't care. He saw something the others didn't. The Cobblecat was freedom, escape, wind and water and wild stories, and Davos had no tongue worth selling, just a desperate need to get away from this place before the streets swallowed him like they did the others. That night he crept back, barefoot and breath-held, and climbed through a loading hatch near the stern. He nestled between 2 barrels of pickled eels and waited, silent as grave dirt. When he awoke, the ship was moving. The Cobblecat sailed east under moonlight, the sea dark as ink. Davos peered through a cracked plank at the sky. He'd never seen stars that bright. A cold wind sliced through his rags, but he didn't care. Roro found him 3 days later. He'd nearly died from thirst by then. His lips cracked, his belly cramping, he stumbled out of the hold and collapsed onto the mid-deck during midday prayer. The sailors shouted. Someone kicked him in the ribs. Then silence. Roro looked down at him, squinting as if inspecting a strange fish washed up on deck. "You're either the dumbest rat in King's Landing," he said in a thick accent, "or the luckiest." He didn't kill him, didn't cut his tongue or throw him to the sea. Roro laughed, pulled a peach from his robe and tossed it to the boy. "You work, you live, You steal from me, you swim. Davos nodded. So began his new life. He scrubbed decks, polished armour, fed chickens, emptied chamber pots, and scraped barnacles from the hull. He learned knots, sails, currents. He learned to speak 4 dialects of Low Valyrian, though he barely understood half of what he heard. He learned how to gut a man, how to gut a fish, and that the difference was often a matter of timing. They sailed the shivering sea, traded spices in Mere, stole weapons from Stepstone's war camps, and once sold 20 crates of Lysini silk that turned out to be dyed sheep wool. Roro laughed so hard he wept. Sell the lie before the cloth, he always said, but the boy wasn't like the others. Davos listened more than he talked. He paid attention. When the Cobblecat was nearly boarded by Bravosi tacksmen, it was Davos who pointed out the tide's change, buying them just enough drift to escape through the shoals. When a crewman named Malkan tried to slit his throat one night for a few copper coins, Davos broke the man's nose with a pot and tossed him overboard while he slept. Small, said Roro, but sharp. Over the next year, Davos became a fixture on the Cobblecat. He was never truly part of the crew. Most saw him as a lucky flea. But he earned his keep. He earned his bruises. When storms came, he never puked, not once. He held the rope and gritted his teeth, while older men wept. Then came the reckoning. A black-sailed cutter bearing the 7-pointed star intercepted them just off Skargos, the fleet from Eastwatch by the sea. Roro had been trading axes to wildlings in the shadows of the Frostfangs. It wasn't just a crime, it was treason. They were boarded fast and brutal. Steel rang, men died screaming. Davos hid beneath crates of dried fish, watching through slats as his world burned. Roro didn't resist. He bowed mockingly to the night's watch captain, handed over his ledgers, and asked if the man preferred arbor gold or summer wine. He was executed that night, head taken with a single clean stroke. They left his corpse on the sand and took the Cobblecat as prize. Davos was forgotten. 3 days later, the watch sailed on, leaving him stranded in a small skiff with 2 days' food and the boots of a dead oarsman. It was enough. He was 12, and now he was free. Chapter 2. Blood and Smoke on the Shivering Sea. East of Skargos, 265 AC. The boat was half-rotted and listing when Davos touched oar to water, but it was his. The boots didn't fit, and the food was already turning sour, but he was alive and unchained. No one barking orders, no lashes waiting for mistakes. Just the open sea, and the ghosts of men better fed and worse fated than he. He named the skiff Cat's Claw, in memory of the Cobblecat and Roro Uhoris, who taught him 2 great truths: never trust a Tyroshi, and always know your escape route before you draw your blade. The wind was cruel this far north, dragging frozen mist from the wall across his bones. He wrapped himself in a dead man's cloak, lit a tiny fire in a rusted brazier, and followed the stars south. Davos had never used a compass, but he knew the sky. The black-eyed woman in Liss had taught him to read constellations between stolen kisses. He muttered to the gods, any gods, that he didn't want much. Just a ship with sails that didn't leak and boots that didn't bleed. He got snow. By the time he reached the Sisterton coast, the Cat's Claw was barely floating. A Sisterman fisherman hauled him in with a boat-hook, thinking him a corpse. When Davos sputtered and cursed in Valyrian, the man dropped him back in the water. He spent the next 2 months gutting fish for copper and sleeping in abandoned sheds. He learned that sistermen worshipped the sea itself and spit whenever someone said the word king. He liked that. They were coarse, violent and direct. Davos fit in just fine. One night he heard of a pirate sloop called Serpent's Kiss, docked in the shadows near Goldtown. Its captain, a woman known only as Anya Salt, was taking crew. He walked 3 days in the rain, blisters splitting his heels, just to meet her. Anya was thin and cold-eyed, with one ear and a blade longer than her leg. She looked him over, sniffed and said, "You've got rat's eyes." Davos didn't flinch. Better to see the holes. She grinned. "Fine. You mop blood and keep quiet. Talk, and I toss you in the bay." That was his first real job after the Cobblecat, and his second taste of piracy. The Serpent's Kiss didn't bother with silks or spices. They stole weapons, gold and people. Davos learned quickly which holds to check first for stowaways and which screams meant she's still breathing. He didn't like it, but he didn't run. One night, Anya caught him giving food to a chained boy from Volantis. She didn't kill him, just slapped him hard and said, "Soft hearts sink ships." By the time they reached Old Town, Davos had a choice, stay aboard or vanish. He vanished. He returned to King's Landing 2 years after he'd left it. He was taller, leaner, his hands calloused and face wind-bitten. Flea Bottom had changed, but not much. The same piss-stained alleys, same stink of hopelessness. But now he was different. He tracked down an old friend, Gutter Jim, who ran messages between gangs. Jim didn't recognize him until Davos showed the faded tattoo on his ankle, an old smuggler's mark he'd gotten from a drunken Lyseni for a meal. Jim's eyes lit up. "You lived?" Davos nodded. "I need work." And so he became a whisper carrier, then a runner for the Black Thumb, a dockside fence who bought stolen goods no matter how bloody. Davos was reliable, fast, sharp. Never greedy, never loud. When the Black Thumb was stabbed in a tavern brawl, Davos inherited his contacts. Not officially, he just showed up the next day and kept doing the job. No one stopped him. That was the rule. Don't bleed, don't brag, don't blink. By 16, Davos owned 1/3 of the illegal grain market in the capital. By 17, he had enough coin to buy his first real ship. She was barely seaworthy, patched together from 2 wrecks and a broken dreams. But Davos saw the soul in her. He named her Shorthand, after the nickname some dock workers had given him for how quickly he worked. The Shorthand had black sails, a tight hull, and a crew of 6, 4 ex-convicts, 1 mute woman who could outdrink the lot, and Davos at the helm. His first voyage took him through the southern fingers of the Stormlands, dodging Lyseni corsairs and storm-tossed rocks. He traded fermented goat's milk to the hill tribes for smoked meats, then snuck into White Harbour under false banners to sell it during a food shortage. The guards never knew. On the return journey, a war galley mistook them for pirates. Davos dropped all lights, took the Shorthand through a sea cave with 5 inches clearance, and escaped with only a cracked mast. When the crew asked how he knew the passage was there, Davos shrugged. "Didn't," he said, "but I hoped." They laughed. He smiled for the first time in years. Back in King's Landing, he walked the streets of Flea Bottom wearing boots that didn't leak, a cloak of thick Dornish wool and a dagger made from Bravosi steel. He found the spot where his mother had died. Nothing marked it, just a puddle of grease and filth like any other. He knelt. "I'm not a lord," he whispered, "but I'm not a rat either." He didn't pray, just listened to the sound of the city breathing. Then he rose and walked away, never looking back. He had a ship, a name, and coin in his pouch. It was enough. For now. Chapter 3. The Black Sails of Night. Westerosi coasts, 268 AC. They called him many things, sea worm, dock shadow, night knife, but soon everyone just said Davos, and that was enough. You heard it in hushed tones over spilled ale in Sisterton, in wary whispers in the alleys of Old Town, in bribes slipped to guards at White Harbour. Davos Seaworth, the man with the black sails, the man who always got through. He ran silk to Goldtown through a blockade of Arryn loyalists, passing himself off as a crippled spice trader. He floated into Duskendale under the cover of storm clouds, delivering barrels of Dornish red to a lord's mistress who paid in sapphires and secrets. He was seen in White Harbour's fog-choked back channel, bribing a drunk customs officer with a single smoked eel and vanishing before dawn. The shorthand became legend. Slender, fast, silent, painted hull, triple-keel rudder, and sails black as sin. The ship vanished like smoke in shallow water, and Davos knew every cave, shoal, and half-buried reef from the arbour to the wall. His crew changed faces like tides, but they followed him without question. He never promised riches, just survival, and luck, so far, had held. Once, off the coast of Bear Island, they were cornered by 3 ironborn raiders. Outgunned and outnumbered, Davos ordered a full sail into a glacial inlet no sane captain would touch. The hull scraped stone, shattered a rudder, and nearly cracked the keel, but the ironborn gave up chase. Too shallow, too suicidal. "Why didn't we die?" muttered the lookout. "Because I know the sea," Davos said, "and she knows me. The first time he was jailed, it was over salt cod. White Harbour had enacted strict tariffs on southern fish to protect their own markets. Davos slipped in with a hold full of cod and sardines, selling cheap and fast. A minor noble's cousin took offence. City watchman took Davos. He spent 3 weeks in the dungeons beneath the new castle, fettered to a damp wall. Rats chewed at his boots. One bit his knuckle. Davos bit it back. When they finally brought him before the magistrate, the man squinted at his file. Seaworth, Flea Bottom born. 1 ship, no sigil, no noble ties, no criminal record that we've caught. How did you land in White Harbour? "I followed a school of stubborn fish," Davos said flatly. The man blinked, then laughed. He fined him 200 silver stags and told him never to come back. Davos paid in full, with copper 10 heavy sacks worth. Took the magistrate 3 hours to count it. By the time he was done, Davos was already halfway to the 3 Sisters. He was 23 when he met Maria. She worked the docks in White Harbour, the daughter of a riverman with bad knees and a mouth full of broken teeth. Maria carried herself like a storm front, tall, sharp-eyed, with hands that smelled of salt and steel. She sold ropes and ship paint, patch kits and whale oil. She could out-curse any sailor and had once thrown a bucket at a lord's son for groping her. Davos bought pitch from her twice before asking her to dinner. She said no, then she said yes. Then she took him home. They married in the Septon's ward beneath the lighthouse, barefoot, drunk and grinning. She gave him his first real home, a small cottage outside Cape Wrath, where the grass grew wild and gulls cried like newborns. It had a hearth, a shed, and a bed they made squeak and groan through every season. Davos sailed more than he stayed, but every time Maria grew heavy with child, he came home. He always came home. Dale was first, then Allard, then Mathos. Marek, Devon, Stannis and Stefan followed in order like steps on a ladder to the gods. After the 7th, Maria slapped his chest and said, "That's it. My womb is closed for good. You want more boys? asked the sea. Davos didn't argue, but they still made love often, fierce and joyful. Now, when he spilled on the ground or her belly, never again inside. When each son turned 12, Davos brought them aboard the shorthand. He taught them to tie lines, to measure tides, to read the stars. He didn't promise them a quiet life, only a loyal ship and a sharp blade. "They'll call you smugglers," he told Dale once. "Let them. Better a smuggler with honour than a lord with lies." They visited Sisterton during a spring gale and rode the current like a thrown knife. Davos taught the boys how to angle sails against the wind, how to outpace a pursuer by cutting closer to the rocks than reason would allow. He brought Allard to Gulltown and had him barter with iron-born traders, watching the boy bluff and negotiate with growing fire. Mathos once vomited 6 times during a storm and still climbed the mast to tighten a torn sail. Davos didn't praise him. He simply handed the boy a mug of rainwater and said, "You're one of us now." Maria watched it all, smiling with pride and dread. "You'll lose them all to the sea," she warned. "I was lost long before they were born," Davos answered quietly. "I just gave them a better map." By 30, Davos had smuggled everything from Dornish wine to Dothraki stirrups. Once he delivered a sealed chest of wildfire to a hedge knight in the Riverlands. Another time he brought 4 singing girls from Lees to a Tully wedding, only to realise too late they'd been disguised assassins. The Tully heir survived. The girls vanished into the night, and Davos was paid to forget. He forgot nothing. He kept a mental ledger of every favour, every betrayal, every wave that nearly killed him. And he never flew colours, not until war came. But that was still to come. For now he had the shorthand, a woman who kissed like fire, sons who sailed at his side, and a name that grew louder with every tide. Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, they would call him one day. But tonight he was just a man with black sails, slipping into harbour under the cover of moonlight. Chapter 4, A Smuggler's Wife. Old Town, Stepstones, Cape Wrath, 270 to 272 AC. The job was supposed to be simple. 10 barrels, 4 crates. One night, Old Town's merchant princes were feuding again, and Davos had been hired to deliver a shipment of saffron and ambergris to a Myrish broker too deep in debt to show his face in port. Easy coin, no flags, no paperwork, just midnight winds and black sails. But nothing about Old Town was simple anymore. The citadel had grown nosier, the city watch had doubled, and the Reach Lords had begun sniffing around the smugglers' docks, sending page boys in silk to peer into casks and ledger books like they knew how salt water worked. Still, Davos took the job, because the coin was good, because the wind was right, because he was Davos Seaworth, and he always got through. The ambush came halfway through the straits of the Arbour. No warning, no sails on the horizon, just fire. 2 war galleys rose from behind a coastal bluff, trailing smoke and iron, blackfish pennants, house red wine, 1 volley of flaming arrows, and the shorthand was speared through her mainsail. Davos didn't panic. He ordered a hard tack south, cutting close to shore. The cliffs screamed past within arm's reach, so close they could smell the gull droppings. The second volley missed entirely. The third struck water. But the fourth found the hold. "Fire below," Allard shouted. "Douse it," Davos bellowed. "Jettison the crates. Burn the profit before we burn." The crew obeyed. Casks of saffron cracked like thunder on the rocks. Sweet spice filled the air like perfume at a whorehouse funeral. Davos spun the wheel and prayed to the mother, not for his life, but for his sons. The shorthand limped into the stepstones under a torn sail and a hull pissing smoke. They made port in a place that didn't have a name, just a beach of broken teeth and a tide that stank of dead men, a slaver camp barely disguised as a fishing village. No banners, no laws, and no safety. That night, Davos sat alone with a flask of dark rum, watching the skies spit stars into the sea. His knuckles were split, his boots were burnt, and his pride had taken a gut wound. He knew the risk had been wrong, knew he'd taken it anyway, knew Allard had nearly died. Marya would never forgive him, and worse, neither would he. A girl approached, not older than 16, brown hair, matted and crusted with salt, eyes like fog. She didn't speak, just stood there holding a clay cup. Davos took it, drank, watched her disappear into the dark. She reminded him of Marya when she was young, before the calluses and the hard words, back when she'd sing to the boys and dance barefoot in the sand. The next morning the girl was gone. So was one of his crew, gutted behind the tavern, face half-eaten by crabs. Davos didn't ask questions. He loaded what was left of the saffron, repaired the shorthand with rope, pitch and willpower, then sailed straight for home. Cape Wrath looked like heaven, green cliffs rolling into sea spray, Marya on the bluff in a red shawl, arms folded, hair coiled high. She didn't wave when the shorthand docked, she only waited. Davos walked up the slope alone, leaving the crew to tie off the ropes. "You came back with a limp," Marya said. "Got in a fight with a galley. Did you win? I'm here, aren't I?" She sighed and stepped forward, touching his bruised face with her palm. "You keep tempting death. He hasn't taken me yet. No, he just nibbles at the edges." That night they lay in bed in silence, her belly round with their fifth, Marek though they didn't know it yet. She asked if the Red Winds had seen his face. He lied and said no. Later, after she'd fallen asleep, Davos stood barefoot in the yard, staring at the stars and wondering if he was growing too old for this life. He wasn't, not yet. But he could hear the wind changing. After Marek came Devan, then Stannis, named not for the Lord of Dragonstone, whom Davos didn't yet know, but for a sailor who'd once saved him from drowning off Tarth. Then finally Stefan. 7 sons, 7 chances to do it right. Davos sailed for each berth, dropped everything, risked everything. Once he outran a Dornish warship for 2 days straight, just to make it back before Marya's labour broke. Stefan was born on a stormy spring night. The sea roared like a god scorned. Davos held him before he was washed and whispered, "You came from salt and fire, boy. May you never fear either." After that, Marya said no more. No more births, no more pain. "I agree," Davos said, holding her hand, but he still kissed her like a man drowning in beauty, still touched her like she was the only safe harbour he'd ever known. When they came together, it was slow and laughing and fierce. He spilled his seed on her thighs or the floor, but he never left her unsatisfied. They made love like people who knew how easily the world could end. In time, the shorthand became too small for the work. Davos sold her to a merchant lord in Gulltown who thought he could duplicate the luck that sailed in her hull. He couldn't. With the coin, Davos bought a new ship. A true galley, sleek, fast, iron-forged, with black sails twice the size of the old ones. He named her Black Betha, after a woman from a sailor's tale who lured men to sea and devoured their hearts. Marya raised an eyebrow at the name. "I thought ships were supposed to be lucky." "She will be," Davos promised, "because I'll fill her with my sons." Chapter 5. Dungeons and Daughters of the Sea, Stepstones, Lys, Cape Wrath, 273 to 275 AC. The Black Betha was a beauty, sleek as a sword and twice as sharp. 40 oars, a curved bow, and a crew of 23 hard-eyed bastards who owed Davos their lives or owed him coin. The hull drank moonlight, her sails bled shadow. She didn't glide through water, she hunted, and for a while everything went right. Davos smuggled rare spices from Volantis, exotic silks from Karth, and once a rumoured Valyrian steel helm from Braavos, though it turned out to be blackened tin. He traded with hill clans, bribed magistrates, outran corsairs, and charmed ladies in half a dozen ports. His sons began to make names of their own. Dale captained a skiff for scout work. Allard proved himself in a knife fight in Myr. Mathos read maps better than most maesters, but nothing lasts forever, not on the sea. It started in Lys. Davos had docked Black Betha on a whisper. A noble in exile needed passage home discreetly. The coin was good, too good. He should have walked away the moment he saw her. She was Lyseni, tall, with eyes like broken glass and a mouth that spoke perfect Westerosi despite lips painted blue. She wore a perfume that made the men stupid and a dress that clung like smoke. "Call me Sarah," she said, handing Davos a velvet pouch heavy with dragons. He didn't ask what her real name was, didn't ask why Lyseni guards were suddenly doubling patrols, didn't ask why the magistrate's son was missing. Davos took the coin, took the woman, and took Black Betha out of harbour on a night with no moon. Halfway to Cape Wrath, the Lyseni navy showed up. 3 ships, big ones, fast, painted sails, no warning, no mercy. Davos ordered full speed and prayed. Black Betha leapt through the waves, scraping along rocks and driving through shallows too tight for the enemy to follow. The Lyseni lost 1 ship on a reef, another trying to turn. The third chased them into a fog bank and vanished. No one ever found it. Afterward, Sarah tried to seduce him. "You saved me," she whispered, cupping his jaw. "I owe you everything." "You paid," Davos said, brushing her hand aside. "We're even." That didn't stop her from trying again the next night, and the next. He never touched her, because every time he saw her, he thought of Maria, of Dale learning to navigate, of Stefan still crawling, of the life he'd built with blood, salt, and love. A kiss would cost too much. Sarah disembarked at a hidden cove south of Blackmont. She kissed him anyway. He didn't return it. 3 weeks later, he heard a bounty had been posted in Lys. 1,000 gold dragons for the return of a missing noblewoman, or her body. Davos changed Black Betha's paint the next morning. Later that year, a job went to shit in the Stepstones. He was delivering weapons. Illyrio Mopatis's gold bought them, though Davos didn't know it at the time. The client was a former Myrish warlord who fancied himself the king of smoke. His men turned on Davos the moment the crates hit the beach. Davos and Allard fought their way back to the Betha, blades slick, breathing blood, but the others didn't make it. 4 crew died. The 5th, young Joss, barely 16, was taken. Davos didn't sleep that night, nor the next. He returned to that island with fire. Black Betha rained tar and steel. They burned the camp, reclaimed Joss, half mad, half dead. Davos slit the King of Smoke's throat himself, took his ring, threw his body into the sea. When they sailed away, Allard said nothing, just gripped his father's shoulder and held it a moment too long. Back in Cape Wrath, Davos felt the cost in his bones. Maria saw it the moment he stepped off the gangplank. "Too much," she said. Davos nodded. They didn't speak for an hour. Then they lay together in the shed behind the house, where the walls didn't echo. She cried. He didn't. He couldn't. His tears were buried in salt and fire. "I saw a girl in lace," he confessed later. "She wanted me. I said no." Maria laughed. "Of course she did. You smell like danger and bad ideas. You're not mad. I'm glad you remembered where your heart lives." They made love there on the dirt floor, slowly, reverently. When they were done, she kissed his chest and whispered, "Let that girl dream of you. I'm the one who gets your breath." A month later, word came from Gulltown. A merchant lord's son was trying to claim salvage on the old shorthand, arguing that Davos had faked its damage to cheat him. Davos didn't waste time. He sailed to Gulltown in 2 days, marched into the harbour court with Devon and Marek at his side, and presented the original contract, signed, sealed, and legal. The magistrate ruled in Davos's favour. The merchant's son spat on the floor. Devon broke his nose. The court guard looked the other way. That night, Davos and his sons sat on the dock, watching the tide crawl in. "I'll be dead one day," Davos said, "but this is yours now." He handed Devon the helm's coral handle, the one from the shorthand, salvaged after its last voyage. "Keep it or burn it. But know what it means." Devon didn't speak, just held it close, like a sword or a story. Davos sailed less the next year. He took jobs closer to home, smuggled spices from Sunspear to Cape Wrath, ran messages between Storm's End and Dragonstone for men too proud to admit they needed a smuggler, but he felt it. A pull in the waves, a breath in the wind. Something was coming, and it smelled like war. Chapter 6. Sons of the Storm. Dragonstone, Shipbreaker Bay, Cape Wrath, 276 to 278 AC. It began with whispers, storm crows in the taverns, murmurs on the docks. Lord Robert Baratheon was raising banners. The Mad King had murdered Rickard Stark, then Brandon, then others. The realm, once merely cruel, had turned insane. Davos heard the rumblings in a Lyseni spice house, then again in a backroom brothel in Duskendale, then in White Harbour, from a Tyroshi trader who wept as he spoke of Aerys's pyromancers. No one said war. Not yet, but everyone knew. The world was catching fire, and Davos had spent his life learning how to sail through smoke. The Black Betha was docked at Driftmark when he got the Raven. A merchant out of Dragonstone, one of Stannis Baratheon's men, wanted to meet. Davos considered ignoring it. He didn't owe the Baratheons anything, but something about the tone, a quiet urgency, not desperate, not demanding, felt different, so he sailed. Dragonstone rose like a beast from the sea, jagged black stone shaped by fire and shadow. Even seasoned sailors muttered prayers as they neared it. Davos did not. He didn't fear dragons. He feared men. Inside the great hall, Stannis Baratheon stood alone. No entourage, no page boy. Just a map, a candle, and the weight of coming war. "You're Davos Seaworth," he said without looking up. "I am. You've broken half the realm's trade laws, slipped past red wine fleets, smuggled beneath 3 lords' noses." "All true," Davos replied. Stannis finally looked up. His eyes were made of stone and storm clouds. "Good. I need a man who doesn't care about rules, only results." Davos said nothing, waiting. "There's a siege coming," Stannis continued. "Storm's End will need food, medicine, tools, things that will not get past the royal fleet. I want you to plan the routes. I want you to succeed. And the reward?" Stannis didn't blink. the chance to serve someone who doesn't lie. Davos left Dragonstone with a map, a sack of gold, and a sense that he'd just stepped into a much bigger game. Back in Cape Wrath, Maria knew immediately. "You've taken a noble's coin," she said, setting down a basin of washwater. "He's not like the others," Davos answered. "No, he's colder." That night they didn't speak much, just lay in bed listening to the wind outside. Davos held her hand. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper. "Don't make me bury you." He kissed her fingers. "I won't die for a king. Stannis isn't a king." "No," Davos murmured, "but I think he might win one." The boys came of age faster than the sea could steal them. Dale had his own cutter now, used for scouting ahead of Black Betha through reef-filled channels. Allard ran supply drops from Driftmark to the Stormlands, dodging red wine blockades by disguising himself as a fishing vessel. Mathos and Devan took over logistics. Maps, schedules, bribes. Marek watched the crew. Stannis sharpened every blade on the ship by hand. Stefan, still young, spent most of his time in the galley, burning everything he touched, laughing the whole time. Davos watched them all with pride and dread. He'd raised them for this life, and now it was here. "You boys sure you want to bleed for someone else's banner?" He asked them one night on deck. "We're not bleeding for a banner," Dale said. "We're bleeding for you." That shut Davos up. In the months leading to the siege, Davos perfected the art of slipping through the noose. He invented new routes, braved stormy passes, and once used a thunderstorm to mask the sound of his oars as he crossed Shipbreaker Bay with 6 tons of onions and pickled fish. He never missed a delivery. Stannis never thanked him, just nodded. That was enough. One night, on a return trip to Cape Wrath, Davos found Maria waiting by the shore. "No smile, no wave. You were gone too long," she said. "There was a blockade. There will always be a blockade." He dropped to one knee in the wet sand. "I'll stop," he said, "after this. One last run." Maria stared at him. "You've said that before. This time I believe it." She pulled him up. "Then make it count." They walked back to the house together in silence. Later, in bed, she reached for him, not in lust, but in need. They made love quietly, slowly. When he finished, he lay beside her, staring at the ceiling. "I'm scared," he whispered. "Then you're still human," she replied, and kissed his brow. Storm's End was starving. Stannis sent the Raven. The castle was down to rats and salted leather. No relief force, no hope, no food. And still Davos came. In the dead of night, under black sails, riding waves that broke lesser ships in half, Davos Seaworth delivered salvation to a doomed castle. He braved a blockade and fed an army. He didn't ask for thanks. He only wanted to go home, to Maria, to his boys. But Stannis had other plans. Chapter 7, The Siege of Storm's End. Shipbreaker Bay, Stormlands, 278 AC. The gates of Storm's End were sealed, but the stench seeped out anyway. Hunger, sweat, and hopelessness. Davos knew it before he reached the shore. He could smell death in the salt. The Black Betha bobbed in dark water, her crew silent as ghosts. The blockade had tightened. Red wine sails hovered like vultures along the horizon. A lesser man would have turned back. A smarter man would have never come. Davos was neither. "Lower the longboat," he ordered. Dale and Allard helped load barrels, onions, salted cod, dried fruit, vinegar-soaked roots. Food fit for rats. Food fit for survival. Enough to keep the men within those walls alive just a little longer. Mathos lit a lamp, barely visible under the shroud of night. "You want luck?" Dale asked, handing Davos a dagger. "No," Davos said. "I want silence." He rowed ashore alone. Storm's End loomed above him, blacker than the night around it. Its great stone walls were streaked with moss and shadow, but the defenders had not abandoned them. Torches flickered atop the battlements, half defiant, half hopeless. He could hear them before he saw them, boots, chains, gaunt coughing, men who hadn't eaten in days. He beached the longboat and stood up slowly, hands visible. No weapon, only food. "Who goes?" came a ragged voice from above. "Davos Seaworth," he shouted. "I bring meat and onions. Open the gate." There was a long pause. Then came the creak of ancient hinges and the groan of a gate not used in weeks. He was met not by soldiers, but skeletons with swords, hollow-eyed men in crusted armour, their cheeks sunken and lips cracked. A boy near the back wept openly when he saw the barrels. They took him to the great hall. Inside waited Stannis Baratheon. Stannis looked worse than the starving men around him. His face was drawn tight over high bones, and his eyes were sunken coals. But his posture, his spine, was still rigid. Unbowed, unbroken. "You came," he said. No warmth, no surprise, just a grim confirmation. Davos knelt. "I did. You fed my men. Yes, you saved Storm's End." "No," Davos corrected. "I delayed its death." Stannis nodded. "Good. Then you broke royal law. You smuggled goods into a castle under siege. You committed treason." Davos didn't flinch. "I did." Stannis stepped forward. "And for that I'll knight you." Davos blinked. "My lord? You deserve reward and punishment." Stannis drew his sword. "For your service to House Baratheon, I name you Ser Davos of House Seaworth. I grant you lands on Cape Wrath, a house name, a sigil of your choosing." Davos opened his mouth, but the blade was already rising. "And for your crimes I will take the first joint of each finger on your left hand." Davos didn't move. "Do it," he said. "But swing it yourself." Stannis met his eyes. Of course, the pain was white, blinding, righteous. Davos clenched his teeth as bone cracked, blood sprayed, and steel bit again and again until the pinky was gone, the ring finger, the middle, the pointer. 4 joints, 4 sins. When it was done, Davos collapsed to his knees, hand cradled against his chest like a newborn. Stannis handed him a linen bandage. "We are clean now." Davos said nothing. He wrapped the hand, slowly, with pride. The next morning he was fitted for a new cloak, grey, the colour of the sea before storm. He chose his sigil, a black ship on a grey field with a white onion on its sail. The men of Storm's End cheered him. Some called him mad. Most called him the Onion Knight. He sailed home with 4 fingers and a future. Back in Cape Wrath, Maria didn't ask. She just saw his hand and wept quietly into his chest. "I'm whole," Davos said, "more than I've ever been." She held him like she didn't believe him, then kissed his knuckles. Each missing one, a benediction. Later that night they stood together on the bluff, watching the tide. "You're a knight now," she said. "I, a lord. Strange, isn't it?" She smirked. "Do I have to curtsy?" "Only if you want supper." They laughed, wind in their hair, moonlight on their shoulders. And Davos reached into his pocket. Inside was a small leather pouch, stained with blood and sweat. He pulled it open and let her see the 4 finger bones, clean and white. "I'll keep them with me," he said. "They bought us a name." Chapter 8. War Galley of the Realm. Dragonstone, Narrow Sea, Cape Wrath, 279 to 281 AC. Davos Seaworth no longer had to sneak through port gates or bribe dockmasters to unload his cargo. He had a crest now, a real one. He had land on Cape Wrath, sworn retainers, and a keep with no name and too much wind. The small folk started calling it Onion Watch. He hated it. The whole damn thing felt like a joke with too much armour. But he endured it, because he had Maria, he had his boys, and he had Black Betha, and he had Stannis. That was more than most men got. On Dragonstone, Davos stood taller. He attended war councils in smoky chambers filled with hardened men, former knights, stormlords, a few second sons with noble blood and too many teeth. Davos was the only one missing finger bones, but no one doubted his right to be there. Stannis made sure of it. "My lord of onions," one red wine lackey once sneered, trying to draw a laugh. Stannis didn't blink. He fed more mouths than you ever did, and didn't need a vineyard to do it. Davos never forgot that. He also never forgave the noble who made the joke. A year later, Davos outbid him for a fleet of riverboats and sank 3 of his smugglers' contracts in Liss. No blood spilled, just ledger work. He was learning. At sea, though, Davos was still king. The Black Betha had been refitted. New oars, reinforced hull, archers' nests along the prow. She flew the Baratheon stag now, but below it still snapped the black sail with the white onion. His boys remained the heart of the crew. Dale served as first mate, Allard as quartermaster, Mathos kept the books. Devon managed the rations and training drills. Marek, Stannis and Steffon rotated through the crew like limbs of a growing body. Each one of them bore Davos's stubborn streak. Each one had earned their scars. They were not noble, they were not graceful, but they were damn good sailors. In 280 AC, Black Betha escorted a convoy of grain ships through the Stepstones under threat of pirate raiders. Davos led the defence with brutal precision. They caught the corsairs at dawn, black sails against a pink sky. Davos ordered the Betha between the lead grain ship and the enemy, taking the first volley of arrows into her reinforced sides. Then he countered, grapples thrown, planks dropped, chaos unleashed. Devon killed 2 with a spear before he was pulled down. Mathos saved him with a dagger through the neck of the pirate. Dale lost a finger, Allard lost a boot, Davos lost his temper. He stormed the enemy's flagship himself, dragging 3 men into the sea with him, and resurfacing on the other side with a soaked beard and a torn cloak. When it was over, they'd sunk 2 pirate ships, captured another, and lost only 1 grain barge. The small folk would eat that winter, and the Baratheon banner flew higher. Back on Cape Wrath, Davos limped into Onion Watch to find Maria organising a harvest festival for the peasants. "War again?" she asked, glancing at the blood on his sleeve. "No," he said, kissing her brow. "Just water that fought back. You always say that, because it always does." She smirked and poured him tea. "You still spill your seed on the ground when you're home? Only after I've worn you out." They made love that night by the hearth, slow and smiling, the way 2 people do when they know the war outside will never matter more than the fire inside. That winter, Davos received a raven from King's Landing. A tourney was to be held in honour of Prince Joffrey's name day. Lords and ladies from every corner of the realm would attend. Stannis had been summoned, and Davos was invited as part of his court. He'd never seen the capital from inside its walls, not since Flea Bottom, not since he'd stolen bread and slept with dogs and washed chamber pots for copper. Now he'd ride through the gates as a knight. Maria helped him shave. Steffon polished his boots. Devon found his old cloak and cut the stains from the hem. Allard and Mathos sparred for the right to captain the Betha in his absence. Davos didn't speak much, didn't smile, didn't trust any of it, but he went. King's Landing was exactly as he remembered, only louder, richer, and filled with more polished liars. The tourney was garish. The crowd cheered boys who'd never held real steel. Gold cloaks flanked pavilions thick with perfumes and secrets. Littlefinger smiled at him once across a table. Davos wanted to vomit. Stannis didn't stay long, neither did Davos. When he returned home, the boys greeted him with barrels of fresh cider and a feast of roast boar. "I didn't win a joust," he told them. "We didn't expect you to," Dale said. "You're our knight, not theirs." Davos smiled. But that night, as he sat alone on the dock, fingers cold and ghosts loud in his ears, he felt something brewing. The wind had teeth again, the sea was stirring, and he knew this peace wouldn't last. Chapter 9. The Crown and the Corpse. King's Landing, Cape Wrath, Narrow Sea, 282 to 283 AC. It started with fire, not wildfire, not dragonfire, the kind born from men, anger catching like kindling. First in the Riverlands, then the Westerlands, then the storm. Jon Arryn had raised his banners. The Vale was marching. Eddard Stark followed. Hoster Tully rode east with swords drawn and eyes red from mourning. And Robert Baratheon, he was already halfway across the King's Road, dragging the Stormlands behind him like a storm tide. Rebellion, it wasn't a word any more. It was a fact. Davos stood with Stannis on the black ramparts of Dragonstone as ravens circled the skies like scavengers. "Robert marches to war," Stannis said. Davos nodded. "He'll need food, ships, men. He'll have them. I'll hold Dragonstone. You'll hold the seas. Just give me the word. You already have it." That was all. No grand speech, no stirring call to arms, just steel behind the eyes and salt in the blood. Davos returned to the Black Betha and set her prow north. In the months that followed, Davos became more than a knight. He became Stannis' shadow, unseen but everywhere. His ship slipped between blockades, smuggled arms to rebel lords, and intercepted loyalist cargo bound for King's Landing. He never once raised a banner in open battle, but every death that followed his shipments was ink on his conscience. He didn't sleep well any more. Not even when Marya curled against him, not even when his sons joked over dinner. He kept a ledger now in a small leather-bound book, not of coin, of costs, ships lost, men gone, towns burned. By the time they reached the Crown Lands, the book was heavy. Then came the Raven. Mathos delivered it, face pale. From King's Landing, Davos read it twice. The Mad King had executed Rickard Stark, burned him alive. Brandon Stark strangled himself trying to save him. The capital was lost to reason. Marya read the letter over his shoulder and said only one thing: "Don't let our sons die for a madman's pride." "I won't," Davos promised, but part of him knew he might not get to decide. Dale was now a captain of his own ship, the Gallant Wing, fast, aggressive and fearless. Too fearless. He took a run along the coast to deliver grain to Tarth and never came back. Word reached Davos 3 days later, caught in a storm, wrecked against jagged rocks. Body never recovered. Davos said nothing. He just walked into his keep, went down to the cellar and screamed once, loud and long, into the dark. He buried an empty box beside the cliff, with Dale's favourite rope knife tucked inside. Marya held his unbroken hand and wept with him. That night, Davos opened his ledger and added a name. Then he burned the book. Allard took it hardest. He blamed himself. Said he should have been there. Said the tide was wrong. That Dale never should have been out. He started fighting in taverns. Stopped laughing. Davos found him one night half drunk, knuckles bloody, face bruised. "You think this makes it better?" Davos asked. "I think I'm still alive," Allard muttered. "That feels like a mistake." Davos didn't answer, just pulled him close. "I've bled for this realm, boy," he said, "but I'll bleed for you too. Don't make me bury another." Allard didn't speak, but he never drank again. King's Landing fell to Robert's rebellion. The Mad King was dead. His pyromancers burned with him. Rhaegar Targaryen bled out on the trident, a crown broken beside him. Eddard Stark found his sister dying in a tower. Jon Arryn brought peace, and Robert Baratheon was crowned king. When the Raven came, Davos opened it on the cliffside. Maria brought him a flask. "What does it say?" she asked. "He did it." "Robert?" "Aye." She waited. "And what of Stannis?" Davos looked to the sea. "He's been given Dragonstone, as reward. And you?" "I've been summoned to court." Maria snorted. "Wear something clean, then." Davos returned to King's Landing with a new cloak trimmed in storm grey. He brought Mathos and Steffon with him. The city looked the same. Smoke, rot, rats in brocade. But the banners had changed. Baratheon stags flew high above the Red Keep. Robert greeted him with a grin and a cup of wine. "I remember you," he said. "The Onion Knight." "Ser Davos now," Stannis corrected. "Titles, titles. You saved my brother's bony arse, and I don't forget a debt. What do you want?" "Nothing," Davos said. Robert's grin faded. "Everyone wants something. I want peace. For my family. For my king." Robert drained his cup. "Then sail back home. You've done your part." And just like that, Davos was dismissed. No medals, no lands beyond what he had, but also no enemies. Not yet. He bowed and walked away. On the voyage back, Mathos asked, "Did we win?" Davos looked at the sea. "No, lad, we just didn't lose." Chapter 10. Storms Remember. Cape Wrath, Dragonstone, King's Landing, 298 AC. The years passed like waves against the hull, endlessly rolling, reshaping the shore, carving stone into memory. Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, lived quiet after the war. Not soft, not idle, just quiet. He rebuilt the watchtower at Onion Watch with his sons, stone by stone, fingerless hand wrapped in leather. He turned raiders into fishermen, smugglers into honest dockmen. He took no new lands, asked for no favours, and he never once called himself a lord. Dale was gone, and that wound never truly closed. Allard grew into steel and shadow, a grim man with a storm behind his eyes. Mathos found peace in scrolls and sails, guiding the Black Betha as a master of tides. Devon became the house's steward, calm and calculating. Marek and Stannis took to the sea as cutters, quick and bold. Steffon, the youngest, was reckless as the wind and twice as loud. Maria watched them all and smiled like a woman who knew she had done her work well. Every year Davos lit 7 candles, one for each sun. One burned shorter, but it burned. In 290 AC, Stannis summoned him again. Robert's rule had soured. The king drank more than he ruled, and the Lannisters wrapped their claws around the crown. Whispers of bastards, whispers of betrayal. Stannis saw rot in every corner of the realm, and he trusted only Davos to hear it. "You're my voice at court," he said. "I was never good with courtiers," Davos replied. "Then they'll know I sent you." He sailed to King's Landing again, this time older, greyer, and far more dangerous. He saw the court for what it was. Masks on masks on masks. Varys smiled, Littlefinger plotted, Renly played. Cersei watched with golden eyes and venom beneath her lashes. And in the middle of it all, Robert Baratheon, tired, bloated, laughing like he didn't feel the kingdom slipping between his fingers. Davos stayed only as long as duty demanded. Then he sailed home, back to the storm. One spring a storm struck Cape Wrath harder than it had in years. Wave swallowed boats whole. 12 houses were washed out to sea. Davos, now past 50, led the recovery himself. Fingerless hand wrapped in oilcloth, eyes red from salt and smoke, he pulled children from collapsed sheds and dragged shattered timbers into new foundations. Stefan joked he looked more like a drowned priest than a knight. "Knights shine," Davos said. "I shovel mud." The people didn't cheer. They didn't kneel. They just worked beside him. That meant more. In 298 AC, King Robert called a great tourney for Prince Joffrey's name day. Stannis would not attend. But Davos, he was sent. He didn't want to go, but duty was duty. Marya helped him pack. "Do you think they remember what you did?" "No," Davos said, "and I'm glad." She kissed his chest. "Then come back quick. The crops need tending." "So do I." He walked the streets of King's Landing as a ghost. Flea Bottom looked smaller now, dirtier, but less cruel somehow. He passed the baker's stall where he'd once stolen bread. The man was gone, the oven was gone, but the smell of charred flour lingered. Davos closed his eyes. He took out the pouch from his belt. The same leather, the same bones, the 4 finger joints, yellowed and worn smooth. He held them in his palm like dice. "You bought all this," he whispered, "and I still don't know if it was fair." Then he tied the pouch shut and walked away. He returned to Cape Wrath the next day. The sun was just cresting over the sea. The tide was low. His sons were already on the dock, arguing over rigging. Marya sat on the porch, mending a net, hair streaked with silver now. He sat beside her. "Tawny? Waste of gold," he said. "Court? Full of peacocks? King? Still breathing?" She smiled. He didn't need to say anything else. That night, Davos stood alone on the cliffside. The Black Betha was anchored in the cove below, her sails rolled and her deck silent. The wind brushed his beard. He opened the pouch one last time, removed the bones. One by one he dropped them into the sea. A thank you, a goodbye. The waves took them without question. Storms pass, but the sea remembers. Epilogue. Year 299 AC. Location, the shore below Onion Watch, Cape Wrath. A boy ran barefoot through the tide pools, hair black as coal, cheeks red from wind. He carried a small, battered helm, too large for his head, dented at the crown, but still polished. His brothers chased behind him, shouting about pirates and kings, about dragons and ships and storms that whispered secrets if you listened hard enough. The old man sat nearby, on a carved driftwood bench smoothed by time and salt. A book lay in his lap, blank pages. He no longer wrote, he simply watched. Davos Seaworth was 72. He no longer sailed. The Black Betha had been dry-docked 5 years ago. Her hull was cracked beyond repair. His sons had offered to build a new one, but he had smiled and said let her sleep. She did her work. Now he spent his mornings walking the cliffs with Marya, who'd lost none of her sharpness, nor her tolerance for his brooding silences. She still teased him, still scolded him for limping without cause, still insisted he spill his seed outside when the fire burned between them, which, surprisingly, it still did. Life had narrowed to good earth and salt air. He was no longer a knight at court, no longer the voice of Stannis. The world spun now around dragons, queens, and wars that belonged to younger men, and that was just fine. The boy dropped the helm at Davos's feet and grinned. "Tell the story again," he demanded. "The one about the onions and the burning—" Davos raised an eyebrow. "You've heard it a dozen times. I want it again. You only like it because the king cuts my fingers off at the end." The boy grinned wider. "It's the best part," Davos chuckled. "Well, I suppose it is." He picked up the helm, ran a thumb across the edge. It had once belonged to Dale, or maybe Allard. The memory blurred now, but the weight of it never changed. He looked out to sea, past the tide and the gulls, to where storms still brewed on the horizon. Somewhere out there, ships still sailed, men still bled for kings who would forget their names. But Davos? He'd outlived kings, outlived storms. He was salt. He was smoke. He was still standing. The boy leaned against his leg. "Were you scared?" Davos blinked. "Back then, when the king took your fingers," Davos looked down at his hand. "4 fingers missing, the ghost of pain long gone." "No," he said finally. "I was grateful. Why? Because it bought everything that came after." The boy thought about that, then nodded. "Tell me the whole story again." Davos smiled and began. He was born in the gutter, rose by the tide, and when the winds howled and the storms came, Davos Seaworth stood tall, because even broken hands can carry a kingdom's future. Author's note: Davos Seaworth has always been one of my favourite characters in a song of ice and fire. Not because he's powerful, not because he's flashy, but because he's real. He's not born to greatness. He earns it, inch by inch, storm by storm, with cracked knuckles and a bleeding conscience. In a world where kings burn their enemies and lords sharpen smiles like swords, Davos does something radical. He tells the truth. He keeps his word. He sails home to his family. This story was never about thrones or dragons or prophecies. It was about a man who lost fingers but held fast to his soul. A man who loved his wife fiercely, raised his sons with pride, and walked into fire not for power, but for honour. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking this shoreline with me. For every quiet father, every working man, every loyal friend who chose decency when no one was watching, this one's for you. Brian M. Brumbaugh.